Welcome to the second in our three-part Virtual Excursions training program. My name's Jackie Randalls and I've coordinated this program for national delivery as part of my role managing Inspiring Australia in New South Wales. For those new to Inspiring Australia, it's the national strategy for public engagement with STEM. We work with hundreds of community partners to connect scientific researchers to big audiences. And today's training is all about doing just that in the virtual world. It will be produced and delivered by Fizzics Education, Sydney Science Education and Refraction Media. And I'd like to acknowledge support from the New South Wales Office of the Chief Scientist and Engineer and Inspiring Australia's state programs in New South Wales, the ACT, Queensland, Western Australia and South Australia. It's our hope that with the skills you'll learn in this course, you'll be well equipped to deliver exciting online programs for National Science Week in August and at other times of the year. Do connect with the IA program in your state. Your state manager is listed on the contact page of the National Science Week website, where we encourage you to log your events as they're organised. Enjoy the training and please let us know how useful it is by completing the evaluation survey that will be sent to you after each session. Many thanks, and I'll now hand over to Ben Newson from Fizzics Education.
Yes, g'day everyone. Welcome to another big session when it comes down to learning about web conferencing in all its different forms. My name's Ben Newsom and there's actually quite a lot of people involved in this chat. Very shortly you'll be able to meet Karen Player from Refraction Media. You'll get to meet Heather Catchpole, Karen Player from Sydney Science Education. There's too many people here. Heather Catchpole from Refraction Media. We have a number of people from Fizzics Education. We'll have Jackie Cow. We have Stephanie Ruiz, we have Russell Sandstrom, we have Bonnie Tratt from the New South Wales Department of Education through the Distance and Rural Technologies Group. You'll get to hear more of what they get up to. Fizzics does a lot of science outreach, has done for 15 years, but we've also been lucky enough to do distance education for the last 10 years, and we really want to share really what we've got up to and how we can help you with all this type of online STEM training. Now, there are so many people across Australia. I want to welcome everyone, regardless of where you are from, and also want to especially acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of our land. I mean, thank you for having us along and having this journey to really be awesome. I want to pay my respects to everyone involved, the past, present, future elders, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome if you're here. So look, I want to pass over Karen initially, who will be able to go over the structure of today, and I hope you have a great session.
Thanks very much, Ben. So we've got lots of people joining us today. We're going to be really focusing on engagement. So my name's Karen from Sydney Science Education. Thank you, Ben. And I have been working and doing digital and online engagement programs for over 10 years and working with a lot of the people that you will be talking to today as well. So the structure that we've got, Ben and I will share a little bit of our experiences. I'm going to focus on the small sessions, that sort of more personal engagement. Ben's going to start talking about some of the big picture ideas as well, and some of the tools that you can use within big programs to make sure that you've still got engaging contents and engagement with your audience. We'll really be focusing on today about planning as well, really knowing what you want to achieve, who your audience is, and what's the best platform. Is it a small forum? Is it an interactive session? Is it a big webinar? Is it a live stream? So knowing your audience and having that research in mind really helps you plan ahead and get the best out of your programs and the most engagement as well. One of the things that we've been talking about for all of the sessions as well is really focusing on safety. And that's a really important aspect, not only child protection issues as well. We covered a fair bit of that in the Web 101, but always remembering, having it in the back of your mind, no matter what type of platform you're using, is to think about that. So it creates a safe environment, not only for child protection, but also a safe environment for you to share ideas with your audience and with your during your session. So something that will come up throughout all of our sessions will always be reverting back to that safety aspect. And once you've planned, you know what your audience is, you've thought about the platform that you'll use to engage best with the audience, then it's time to work out all of the settings in that platform that will ensure child protection, whether you're dealing with families, individual students, and adult learners as well. So Ben, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure, no worries. And look, thanks very much for joining. Now, let's acknowledge there's so many different web conferencing platforms, and they all have little buttons to press. They've all got little things to tick or not tick. And just be aware, definitely, when it comes to child protection, we do say this a lot. We will say this on every single one of these sessions because it is so important to get that right. Make sure that right now we have roughly 200 people all talking in the public chat. And by the way, you are welcome to ask questions throughout this session. If you look down the bottom of your screen, it'll say Q&A. And you'll be able to click on that. Make sure you send that to the panelists to ask a question, and we'll be able to certainly answer it. But if you look on the chat, you'll see there's lots of people saying where they're from, which is very cool and very useful in a public forum. But you can imagine that if you've got a question that you want really answered, it can get buried really fast in that feed. Now, the reason I mentioned the chat there was that we do need to keep in mind that public chat means things can get put into there, which means if you're creating an online STEM festival or whatever it is that you're going to do, be aware that web links can be put in there. People can share virtual backgrounds that we may not ever want to see ever again. All those sorts of things can happen. So just think about what thing is correct for the medium that you're running at. Now, one of the things that we do, and you will see this very soon, definitely from Jackie and Bonnie very soon with their presentations, is when you've got so many people involved in a conference like this, in this case we're using a platform called Zoom Webinar, polling by far is the easiest way to interact with everyone because it aggregates everyone's ideas in one go, and then you as the presenter can then talk to it. It helps out really a whole bunch. Now, one of the reasons I got a little bit muddled up before at the start was there's that many panelists and moderators involved in this chat. I mean, normally in traditional settings in a normal video conference environment, you might have one person on camera, potentially two, and you might have maybe what might be called a tech person potentially to help out, make things happen in the background. When you're dealing with a large audience, and especially when you're dealing with a lot of questions and answers back and forth, it's really important to have a back channel communication. Now, sometimes people want to use that in the web conferencing platform itself to talk to the panelists and that's it. There's a risk. If you do that, you might just write something going, all right, I could write here, Karen, in 3 minutes we're about to do the thing, whatever that thing might be, and then suddenly that's sent out to the attendees, and everyone can see the back channel sharing, and it's so easy to make that mistake. So we actually use a free platform called Slack. Now, I know there are other communication platforms around. We have to acknowledge they're definitely around. Zoho Click's another one. Slack is handy because you can really quickly get everyone all into a shared chat space, and then you can actually have that channel to talk about. And I know, because my phone will be flashing soon, if people are talking behind this to make sure it's that's working quite well. Now, polling's fine, back channel chat's fine. Going large doesn't always necessarily have to mean a traditional web conference. A number of you in this webinar have already done live streams, whether it's to YouTube or Facebook. What comes with that is hooking the things up, making sure that the stream key that you've got actually talks to the stream key where you're sending your people. That's a start. Secondly, little things that can turn up, for example, YouTube. In this case, at this point in time, if you set up a brand new account, if you want to start live streaming, you've got a 30-day wait. And so if you want to go live straight away, it's not going to help you much. In fact, quick advice, even if you think you're not going to do live streaming out to the broad world, set up an account anyway, because you may not ever use it, but at least you'll have it there and ready to go after the fact. Now, the thing is, though, when you're doing any of these sessions, dealing with child protection rears its head whether it's live streaming or whether it's in a conference forum. Just be aware that in a live stream out to the big bad world, people can effectively type back in that area. Now, I do know that people have shut down commenting before in public streaming. That is a thing you can do. But of course, that reduces interactivity. So you've got to work out what balance you want to do. So how are you going to work around this? You can stream into a private space, a private group, a private link and invite people where it can't just be publicly discovered. That's not a bad way to go. Other ways around this is that you can introduce polling only as the way of getting feedback. If you try and do it with a third-party app, and we talked a little bit about desktop sharing in the first sessions, you will have a slight delay between 15 and 40 seconds, depending on where the servers are, YouTube or Facebook are. It does make a difference. So you kind of have to think about, yes, we can interact with our audience, but what do you want them to type and how are we going to play nicely together? That's something to be aware of. Now, whenever you're doing a live stream, consider having a backup stream key. Now, not all platforms will allow for this, but that backup stream key is literally what it sounds like. It's just an extra key that's sort of running in the background. So if something goes down, you can still be streaming again with no dramas. Now, what can happen though is that everything can go completely awry, like totally gone. At least having, and this is, you might have to do a bit of planning for this, having something to get out to your audience, whether it's pre-recorded or at least a quick link, can help quickly, and it makes a difference. Now, what I thought I might do is I might quickly just show you with my video here that, of course, when we talked in the last sessions that you can swap cameras around. Now, there's no reason why you can't swap your screens around and do some interactivity in some different ways. So I might just call out to Karen to make sure I don't catch her off guard. Hey, Karen, have you got a musical instrument ready to go and have a bit of a chat with me?
Yes, I do, Ben.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so this is sort of an impromptu thing made up honestly about 15 minutes ago or so. And so what we're going to do is we're simply going to go and do a share screen. So I'm going to go down to the bottom of my screen. I'm going to click on share screen and I'm going to choose the screen I'd like to share. And in this case, I have a virtual oscilloscope. Now, we can share the link in the chat fairly soon, but right now you can see my voice, not exactly dulcet tones, but you can see it's working. Now, some people will have an internet delay depending on how good your bandwidth is, but you can see it's picking up my voice. Now, if I stop talking for a moment and Karen plucks a string on her guitar, let's see if she can control what I'm doing from here. Nice. So that works. Now we've used, you could use a dog whistle if you really want to get fancy. You could use, for those people saying we are talking to a science audience, of course you could be playing pure notes in different ways. You could look at the hertz, you could look at the frequency, but more importantly, Karen's not in my room. Now I might just flick this out and stop share for a moment. I did this with a group whereby the session was with a New York group and I'm in Sydney, and we're actually able to measure, not only see the wavelength of their sound happening in my room, but we could also see the delay that it honestly took for the satellite signal to get to me to work, which is kind of nice. You could actually measure this. Other things you can do, I'm going to do another quick change. Actually, before I do, I'm going to hold it up. Those people from the country, and then honestly anyone in the city, this thing, and this going up to camera, an engagement thing is sometimes breaking that flat space. So I'm doing it's blurry, but look at the thing I'm holding in my hand. This is Farmer's Friends, also known as Biden's Pelosa. What you can do is look it up close with a digital microscope. So if I go over to here, now I've got myself, it's a little bit blurry because I quickly shoved it there. I could play around with it and point out things. Now, admittedly, I would have to go up and down and everything else to have a look at things. And we can look at the teeth on the Bidens and see why it grabs onto your socks and doesn't let go. But the idea is that when you're running these programs, you don't need to just do a point and shoot, a one person to one camera. You can bring in multiple devices. You can bring in multiple apps. You'll find that depending on the web conferencing platform that you use, perhaps you might want to do something with, an iPad, like screen mirror an iPad and bring it in or something like that. Share the apps that you already have. Now, I just saw, Karen, you're sharing something over there, which is kind of fun. We got a phasmid.
Yes, Ben, I was just getting set up for my next shot, so I thought I should plan ahead. But what I was doing when I look at small spaces for engagement, I'm using some of my camera settings. So this is a zoom in, and Ben was able to see that whilst I was doing it, and then of course throw straight across. So it almost makes it like that we planned it, but we didn't. He was just able to see that. Now, for me, I do a lot of sort of more biology and environmental science programs, so I do use a lot of live animals and props in the space here as well. So we can see, actually, I don't know if we can see at the moment, of the picture here of the stick insect. So I'm able to talk about legs. We can look at, different features. Sometimes we can catch these guys eating as well. So that's a really easy opportunity for me to be able to create a dynamic presentation by having my camera doing a few things. Now, as Ben was saying, I could switch cameras. If I had fixed cameras, I could have a smaller one plugged in to do the zoom in of the stick insects here. So I use my space to help create those engaging experiences. And one of the things that's always important to remember is, if you are using props, don't use too many. So when you're on doing online programs, too much movement can actually be more distracting. So having sort of simple ideas, knowing that it will take a while for my camera to focus and zoom. So sometimes I might be pausing. I do a lot of programs with children as well. And so I actually get the kids to yell at their computers. The parents must think that it's ridiculous at the other end, but I'll often say, oh yeah, how many legs does an insect have? Hopefully all of you are going to yell out at your computer right now, they've got 6. And we do that. We go through spiders and things like that. And there's pretty much not a session that I run that I don't talk about poo at some point. If we're talking about, dung beetles, and we're talking about putting nutrients back into the soil and why mini beasts are important, it might be that I'm doing a fossil workshop and we're talking about coprolite, so fossilized poo. So getting the kids, or even adults love it too, being able to yell out and engage with those kinds of simple cues that you can give them. You can create a big and a small program, still having that interaction and engagement across your screens. Hi, Jackie, I can see that you've got a question there.
Yep, we've got some questions about screen sharing. I've got 2 questions. Bianca asks, does the screen share with 2 external hosts need a full subscription to service to enable this?
No. It's you mean full subscription to any of these services will give you more bells and whistles, but the screen share is a very fundamental thing in most of these conference platforms. One thing you want to do though is sometimes you may want to lock the screen share so it's only the panelists that do it. Other times you'll open it up broadly. But yeah, absolutely, screen share is a really handy tool. It really is. Sometimes though, I will say, just be clear off whatever else is on your browser, because I may be like you, I honestly have 10 tabs open. And at a conference, I just close nearly every one of them down, because the last thing you need is to show perhaps your emails that are coming through. Another thing is the notifications that turn up on your device. Those notifications might be great, but you really don't need internal chats turning up. And that's even offline. When you're running a STEM engagement program off a stage and you're using a screen behind, those notifications still turn up. So it's usually a good idea to get rid of those. Absolutely.
And this actually follows on to Nadia's question, which is whether we should have each link open in a separate window, even if we're using the same browser, so that when you're switching between websites in a hurry. And think.
No, I love that. I have moved towards going to deliberately choosing the tab only. So I actually do break them out these days, because that way I can guarantee I'm not sharing something else. Though occasionally, if you're using a dynamic program, and actually I might ask with Karen too, I find dynamically sharing the entire screen can be great, but it can get very cluttered and may not look as slick. But you can show lots of things. What do you reckon, Karen?
Yeah, I tend to like to show one thing at a time. So, having the separate tabs open is a great idea. I show a lot of images. So I will, pretty much all of my sessions, at one point, I usually show a PowerPoint presentation that's just usually image-based, and things that I can't either zoom in or I don't have in the room with me, but I really want to show a feature of something. And I will go back and forth through that, remembering no one wants to see a secondary screen your whole session. So you need to make sure that you are going back to a sort of a dynamic, engaging sort of conversation as well as. So screen sharing is always a really great option, and you can really, the sky's the limit with what you want to be able to share, but you just need to make sure that you don't forget to come back across from time to time, so it's creating a more dynamic experience.
Yeah, I might speak to that I have gotten lost before. I genuinely have gotten lost where there's too much stuff on. And in this case with Zoom, you get this little thin green border around the screen, and you're kind of looking for which one you're sharing. Can be a drama. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Know where you are. Any other questions, Jackie?
No, I think it's time for Jackie B's section, if that's all right.
That sounds great. Jackie Benitez, go for it. Introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. It's great to join you all. As you can tell from my accent, I am not from Australia. I'm actually from California in the United States. And so to start off our time together today, I'm actually going to use one of those features that Ben said earlier, and let's go ahead and take a poll. I would love to know, a poll should be popping up about now. Pre-COVID, before this pandemic, what was your organization's experience with virtual learning experiences? And I've picked a couple of things that kind of have popped in my head. Feel free to choose as many as you want. So this is multi-choice. And we'll probably take about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, for you all to go ahead and vote.
Now, in case you're wondering, while it's happening, we can all see that this is in progress, and we can see how many people who have not answered it. So currently we've got 60 people to go. Come on, press a button. Go for it.
Now, as a panelist, I actually don't see that. It's only the hosts that get to see that. So I'm interested. I say if we're at about 75% participation, we can go ahead and close that poll.
All right. Ooh, about 78. Oh, it's still climbing. 70 or
Okay,
79%.
We can go ahead and hold off.
Ooh. Okay, so the majority of our attendees have never thought about live virtual experiences.
All right. Can we share the results?
Yes, we can. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now.
All right.
And sharing the results.
Awesome. So this is another great feature about polling. Not only do you as the educator get to actually see what people are saying live, you see that ticker climbing, but you also get to see and show your participants what the results are. Now, sometimes you can, and it's a good idea to show you the results. Sometimes you don't need to share it with them. I have seen in the past where if I've shared the results, sometimes students, especially kind of the middle-aged, middle grade, they tend to maybe choose the wrong answer specifically. So other students will call each other out. Why did you choose that? So gauge your audience. Figure out, is it appropriate right now to share the polls results, or is it not? So thank you so much, everybody. It really helps me to also, as an educator, be able to know where my audience is. I like to use polling or a question at the very beginning of my sessions just to see what is the knowledge out there already. All right, you can go ahead and stop sharing. So like I said, my name is Jackie. I'm from the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, California. And for those who don't know exactly where I am located, I have a beautiful little picture of our planet Earth, but we can actually zoom in to exactly where the location of the museum I work for is. And it's inside Golden Gate Park in the city. So I have a beautiful commute. And you can actually kind of see the top of our museum. It blends really well into the landscape. And that was on purpose because we have a living roof. You can see the outside of the museum. And I love our museum because we have all different types of sciences that we get to explore. we have a planetarium, we have a living rainforest, and an aquarium. But not only do we have that for the public to be able to come and explore, we are also a research institute. So we have scientists exploring and explaining and helping sustain our planet Earth. And so with that comes some great opportunities where we get to collaborate with scientists, bring them in to talk to students, or use their expertise and find fun facts about their field, and then use that to build our programs. So that's kind of one thing that has been really extraordinary, is that if you have access to science being done right now, or you are doing the science, think about what is the thing that makes and brings you joy about your research, and bringing that to your audience. Because your joy or your excitement is actually going to be contagious. So here at the Academy, just like most of you, we are at a stay-in-place order, and so I don't get to go into my building. I don't have access to a lot of the beautiful things that we have in our building. So we had to shift really fast to how are we going to engage students and families and a broad audience virtually. So we came up with a couple of different types of interactions. We started off and thinking about broadcasts, those big events where you can get lots of eyes. And our very first broadcast was Earth Day. And we were lucky enough that our media team had already purchased a subscription to a platform that was able to stream out to YouTube and to Facebook at the same time and bring all the comments back into it to one location. And that was called StreamYard. Like I said, our marketing team and media team dealt with that, so I have no idea about anything else beyond the name of it. But that was able to bring in a lot of eyes, and we broadcasted this out. We told all our school contacts, give this link to your students, have them join us. We're really excited. And to get to one of Ben's points earlier, we discovered that comment section got a little out of control. We didn't have anything completely inappropriate, which we were very thankful for, but there definitely were some comments that were not on topic, were definitely antagonistic. And so that made us rethink these broadcasts. What is the actual purpose of a broadcast? Is it just because you're getting so many eyes on your content? Or is there an actual purpose for why you're using that type of platform? So be really specific about how you're using those things, and intentional. So broadcasts were a big thing. We've kind of started to pull away from that. For a grade level elementary school, year 1 through 5, just because we've seen that it's not a great interaction. So another thing that we've been doing is we've been taking some of our pre-recorded videos and adding guiding questions. So we had some great videos or of some of our planetarium shows, actually, clips of them. But we wanted students to think a little bit deeper while they're watching those. So we added in some guiding questions, and we can actually look at one of those really quickly on our website here at the Academy. So for example, this clip is looking at photosynthesis over time and see it from space. So our guiding questions we have are, what is carbon absorption a measure of? How do plants respond to seasonal changes in sunlight? And which areas on our planet are the most productive and why? So hopefully students can think about these questions while they're watching this video. Now this is a short video. It's probably about 2 minutes long, but they can loop it over and over again and maybe ask each question individually. Also gives opportunities for them to kind of look a little bit closer and have an intention for why they're looking. And then the one thing that we've been doing, and we've been doing pretty well, at least I think, is we've been doing classroom connections. We've been engaging with individual classes virtually, and we've actually been doing this for about 10 or 5 to 10 years. Can't remember exactly, sorry. But normally we would just connect with one class and then come in. We had to rethink that as well. And so when we were thinking about that, we actually thought about the roles of our staff. And we created educator roles. And Ben actually got to this a little bit of how it's a team to produce either very large events or even small events. So we've kind of been able to categorize it into a couple of different areas. We call it main educator. That's the person that's doing all the talking. We have our support educator. That's the person who might be your counterpart. So for example, I would have considered earlier Ben the main educator, but then Karen was coming in and helping support here and there. Also, you can also think of a support educator as a person who might be the voice of the audience. What do you think the audience is thinking or saying? Maybe it's that, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe this, this is happening. Or, I didn't think that was real. Or maybe bringing up some misconceptions. That can be a voice as well. So that supporting educator can be fun. Now, some platforms and some types of engagements don't really need a supporting educator. Usually what we found is the larger the event, the more likely you're going to need that supporting educator. If it's a smaller event, smaller group, then maybe you just need that one main educator. And then also, chat box educator. That's the person who's there to help support you in the chat box, put links in, ask questions, reiterate questions that may have been missed. Also, a tech support. So, thinking about those roles and thinking about how you are engaging with your audience, it's also important to remember to create norms of how you're interacting. And we've created 3 norms with 3 icons that we use in every single one of our programs. One is called Stop and Jot. This is if a program requires a paper and a pencil, maybe a science journal, for students to either write down their ideas or maybe do a sketch. Every time we want our audience to interact in a stop and jot, we place this icon of kind of looks like a paper and a pencil. So creating clues for what your audience should be doing is important as well. Maybe they started fading out. Maybe they got distracted by their phone. These icons will help bring your audience back and tell them what they should be doing. The other icon is chat box. So for example, if I wanted you to answer a question specifically related to the program, in the chat box, I would have that icon right next to the question that I want you to think about. Now, as Ben said earlier, chat boxes can be intimidating and they can get a little crazy depending on how big your audience is. So sometimes I have seen where if you're doing a webinar like this, they've actually disabled that people can send to the audience as well as participants, as we have enabled today. And that can be a security feature. If you feel like your audience might need to only talk to the panelists and the hosts, you can put that in, at least with Zoom. You would have to research a little bit more with other platforms. And then the last way is using that microphone. Unfortunately today, because we're in our webinar feature, you don't have access to your microphone. But if you're in just a small room, you would be able to turn on and off your microphone. And we've played around a little bit of how we indicate students would like to share out. There's been some suggestions of having the students write their name in the chat box when they would like to share, and then a teacher would call on, or educator would call on a student to share out and unmute themselves. And then also we've had it where we ask the actual teacher of that class to choose students to share out. Also, Zoom has a really cool feature in their main rooms where you can do an electronic reaction of either raising your hand or clapping, and that's a fun way to be able to share that you want to use your microphone and share out. Now, be specific on when you use your chat box and when you want to have students share out. Be intentional because it can get a little bit crazy if you just say, okay, now we're doing chat box, now we're doing microphone. Figure out where is it going to be important to hear your audience's voice, and where is it going to be important to just take a quick glance at a chat box. So things to think about. So kind of went over a little bit of some things that we think about pre-program. I want to kind of dive in a little bit more into some best practices that we have found so far. First, start strong. You may have noticed that I started with a question. I tried to engage you and bring you in. That's really helpful when you're starting off your program, not only to gauge how your students are thinking or your audience is thinking, but also to make them feel like they're part of this time. Also, start with enthusiasm. Being on a platform, you actually need to do a little acting. You need to be a little bit larger than life. So as one of my colleagues say, Jackie on the screen is about 5 decibels louder than Jackie who is talking in a meeting. And trying to match with some of my coworkers can be a little bit hard. And so I have to calm myself, or I have to ask them to bring it up a little bit more. So think about that when you're starting off. Also, another big tip, show something from your organization. So I want you to think about for a second, what is your organization known for? What do you think people are missing because they can't interact with you in person? So I'm going to take a moment. You can use that chat box to let me know. Jackie?
In the meantime, I thought maybe we could answer 1 or 2 questions.
Sounds great.
Specifically for you, actually. Jeff asked, do you have virtual tours?
Great question. No, we don't. And we actually never really have. You may have noticed that, and it's a little harder to see in the images that I showed, but we are a concrete building filled with quite a few very large tanks with water. And what does Wi-Fi hate? Water and concrete. So to do a live tour in our building is actually impossible unless we have a dedicated Wi-Fi device. But even then, there's certain spots in the museum that we would not be able to go at all. There are dead spots. We have tried a little bit of like recorded areas, but we just haven't done that.
Bianca would like to know if she can come and work with you, Jackie. And we have 1 more question from Jackie, a different Jackie. Oh my goodness. Many of the people here are delivering programs to adult, family, youth, and specialist community audiences, not students. Jackie, how do you seek to engage those who absolutely do not have to be there?
Great question. So one of the things we definitely do is try and have our students turn and talk to their parents. Especially here in the Bay Area, we have a lot of different languages that are being spoken in the household. So it's helpful for us to be able to have our students turn and talk to who they are sitting with. We have also had our all our invitations for our programs that they can bring their siblings into the session with them. And we actually had, it was really cute. Today, we had our Waddle Like a Penguin program, and I actually saw 3 generations. I saw the grandmother, I saw the mother, and I saw the son. And they were all playing along. So it definitely is a it's a challenge sometimes, but think about how you can get people to talk to each other. All right, so these are some great things. Thank you so much for sharing some of the things, your amazing collections. That's awesome. Ooh, nuclear reactor. That would be fun to explore. So we've seen so far in the students and the audiences that we have interacted, people want to feel like they're back inside your organization. They feel like they are missing the academy. So showing or displaying something that they know really well is going to engage your audience. So for example, I actually have Claude, our albino alligator, on the screen right now. This is one of the animals we are known for. So every once in a while, I might sneak him in. Or maybe I actually then put a virtual background of something that they know very well, like our aquarium or our lobby. It makes them feel like they are in the place, and it kind of brings back nostalgia of actually being there and wanting to engage. All right, so a last little thing that I wanted to share out before my time is up is, and tip is, change things up and often. Especially when you have a younger audience, you should be changing things up about every 3 minutes. I know that seems like a lot, but you need to be moving. Unfortunately, with this day and age, with students and even with adults, our attention spans are actually really small. So, for example, you might start off your program with some observation time. Maybe it's an image, maybe it's a specimen. So, for example, I happen to have one with me right now. So let's look a little bit closer at this object. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Are there things you recognize? Do you see some of the things that look familiar? So once you've done some observations, maybe it's time to do a hands-on activity with that object. Maybe it's, if you're concentrating on, is this an herbivore or carnivore? Maybe looking at the teeth. Well, we all have teeth. So maybe we do an activity where we ask your audience to bring food out and eat different foods and figure out what different teeth are used for, and then look back at our skull and figure out what teeth are here. Do we think this is a carnivore or an herbivore? What type of teeth do we see? Or maybe it's time to sketch, do a scientific sketch. And when we introduce a new idea, like a scientific sketch, we also try to model it. There's certain ways you can model it. You can definitely use a document camera. Unfortunately, I don't have one. I'm at home. I wasn't able to grab one before I left. So instead, I recorded a video of me sketching this skull right here. And I'm able to narrate over it, saying, to start a scientific sketch, we need to start with shapes. So I see a triangle. I see a circle. Maybe some squares. So as I'm narrating over this, students can either follow along if they like, or I can challenge them and have them sketch their own skulls. And so they're actually doing something. All right, Jackie, what do we have?
Just a real quick question from Leanne, since we're talking about pre-recorded videos. What's the best way to pre-record a session on your own? Can that be done on Zoom?
Great question. That's exactly what I did. So I was lucky enough that our institution allowed myself and one other educator about 2 weeks into stay in place to come back to the museum to collect things. Hence why I actually have a skull with me. Because the first round I did not. I just had my computer and that was it. So I was able to go in and be able to use that document camera real quickly and do that sketch. I used Zoom to record that video. And then I used, I think, iMovie to edit the video when I was ready to. Also, I've had my colleagues who are creating videos at home use this thing for their videos and iMovie. Also, if you're doing something like this, I have a USB camera. I might talk using Zoom as well, and you can record. You can actually export all the recordings out, and then you can do your editing there. GoPros are great as well. So iPads, I've seen lots of different devices. But definitely Zoom has been, if it's something that needs like a document camera or you want to talk face-to-face and you don't have like a tripod for this thing, then definitely use Zoom. All right, so the last thing about changing things up and changing things often I want to share with you is reflection. Reflection is great for any type of learning, whether you're an older audience or a younger audience. It helps you figure out what does your audience know. So maybe it's a reflection question to access their prior knowledge. Maybe it's a reflection question for at the end of your session, talking about what new ideas you might have. All right, and the very last thing I want to leave you on is experiment. Be flexible. This is definitely a different environment than we are all used to. Even myself, teaching for 5 years on this type of platform, there's still things that I'm experimenting with. There's still things that I'm trying to figure out. So give yourself permission to fail. Give yourself permission to try something different the next time. It may be a program that you have tried over and over and over again. Try something different. See if it works. Change things up. It helps you as an educator as well be fresh. Because nobody likes to have somebody who's just reciting a script. And it helps to have that excitement in your presentations. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap it up. Here is my email. If you would like to get in contact with me, I would be happy to help out. Now, do remember, I'm in California. There is a time difference. So if I don't get back to you right away, it might be because I'm sleeping.
Thank you so much, Jackie. We're going to go back to Ben now.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Jackie. And Jackie actually is a really good friend of ours for many years, actually. I actually am heavily involved in the International Society for Technology in Education. And we get to meet all the time, including this morning, to chat with us for Interactive Learning and Collaboration's own things. So, look, awesome. I'm going to add one thing we're going to throw straight to Heather after this. Making it interactive makes all the difference. The hands-on materials, there are sites that will post things out to places. Let's be honest, if you've got 100 people all in different locations, it's less likely you're going to do that. But you can send a PDF with materials that they can have in their room, and that way you can make it interactive. The only advice I'd give you is A plus B equals C real fast. Because you've got lots of hands trying to do things, they're fumbling with their scissors, they can't use their glue and string, whatever it is that you get them to do, make sure they've got a chance to actually achieve it. Now, we did have a comment about nuclear reactor. Now, Heather 100% knows what this is about because she's got something to talk about. So, Heather, take it away.
Thanks, Ben. And that was a very handy segue from Jackie B, because I'm actually going to talk about how you would do a virtual tour of a nuclear reactor. So great to be talking with you all again. My name's Heather Catchpole. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Refraction Media. We're a STEM specialist content company. So I do presenting, but I work a lot more on the kind of production, design and development side of things. We work a lot with students and career changes on careers resources, but we also consult with cooperative research centres, the Association of Deans of Science, Google, ANSTO, and many of the Australian universities. So I'm going to talk about, we started Refraction Media 7 or 8 years ago, and one of the most fun and challenging jobs that I got to do was to work with ANSTO on the development of their virtual tour experience. I'm just going to start with a short video that we created as part of this tour, and just share my screen and start strong, as Jackie B said.
You're about to go on a journey into the world of atoms. A world that forms the building blocks of everything in the universe. From the mind-boggling distances of space to the wonder of the world around us. We are formed from complicated components that are far, far smaller than the eye can see. From the billions of different cells that make up the myriad of life on this planet, to the DNA that forms the blueprint of our genetic code, and even further into the atomic world. Here, electrons travel at just under the speed of light. Protons and neutrons are bound strongly together by nuclear forces. Billions of atoms fit into a space no larger than the head of a pin. Welcome to the amazing world of ANSTO. Our journey begins here at OPAL, Australia's only research reactor. Come with us now and explore this story into the very core of a nuclear reactor.
So you'll have seen there that we wanted to kind of start big and then look at what the experience was going into a nuclear reactor. So there's obviously quite a few problems that you might come across when trying to tour a nuclear reactor. One of those is you just can't get into that. OPAL is Australia's only research reactor, and its main task is to create medical radioisotopes and also doped silicon. But there's a lot of preconceptions about nuclear reactors as a whole. And what we wanted to do was really look at the main area of research, which is environmental health research at those very super small atomic scales. So not many people know that the cage above the reactor that you saw there was actually built because of international requirements after 9/11 that said, just in case a plane happens to fall down from the sky and hit the reactor, please build a cage on top of it just in case. So there was a lot that we found out about going there and doing that. So one of the most fun things that I had to do was to don the protective gear, take videographers into the reactor itself. I took an extreme videographer who specialised actually in extreme skiing, tied him up to the cage, which then slides above the reactor, and we filmed a flyover as we went down, and he said that was one of the most thrilling experiences that he had in his life before he then went on and did some more extreme skiing videography later. So really amazing to get that access and to have that experience. We then used that flyover that we had, the video that we had there, along with the original engineering drawings of the reactor, to basically rebuild the reactor as an animation, as a 3D animation. So there was a lot of components, and you'll see in that final product that some of the video was in there, some of the animation was in there. There was a lot that kind of went together to that. I'm just going to take you through how that was then broken down, and over the next 6 years, how that's been used by ANSTO to create a virtual experience and just allow them to be very adaptable about what different pieces that they created. So I'll just pop you on to share screen again. So originally we thought of this as a virtual tour. It was aimed at across different audiences. The final product that you're seeing here focused a lot on e-learning, and it's been used quite a lot in e-learning resources and packaged up in many, many different ways. Some of those have been packaged up and available offline. I know a couple of people were talking about the problems in accessing very in-depth, high-quality resources like that. Others have been used in some of the live experiences, and it's also been used in the physical tours as well. So, as I say, what we wanted to do is we wanted to create that very in-depth, small scale to look at what ANSTO and the OPAL Research Reactor do best, is to look at materials at those small scales. So we developed a lot of animation around what it is to look at things at that scale. Of course, if you're going to go into reactor and explore the experience of being in a reactor, one of the things that you want to do is to be able to control it yourself. So we did build a control room where we could control the pool temperature, the water flow, the neutron flux, and the radiation levels. If any of you have ever played with nuclear reactors before, you'll know that as soon as that pool temperature goes up, you will go into a critical mass. And that allowed us to also show what happened. There's all these safety procedures. And in that space down the bottom was a little video player that we could allow kids to genuinely interact with this. This work came off the back of developing interactive resources for tablet and iPad. So we were able to take some of that interactivity and build that in. Of course, when that was being presented, the researchers were able to sort of look at those and play with those and create those interactions. So important, I think what Jackie B said is there's no point having just great resources if you aren't able to create those stop periods where you then look at, well, you know, what do you think about this, and reflect on what's going to happen before you, as you do these things. This is the internal view of the reactor itself. We created, you can see the bridge there where we stood as we were able to go do the flyover filming of that. We also took some 3D photos of the reactor space. One of the great, very, very easy ways to create a virtual tour of your space. You literally don't need any other technology apart from a camera which you can stick on a pole and will take square shots of the room around you. That then can be glued together basically as a frame and give you the sense of being inside that space. So there's a couple of the different frames of that 3D experience of being inside the reactor itself. We were then able to overlay that with different touch points which could talk about different elements, what the job was of different pieces of equipment there, so that the audience can sort of deep dive into different sections. We did also create an animation of the research reactor itself. So this is all built on the original engineering drawings. Really fascinating to see what goes into building a reactor. We were then able to highlight different areas to show what was going on at those different spaces. You'll see the pipes going down on the left where the radioisotopes are developed, and down the bottom there is where ingots of silicon are put down and doped, which means that they have another neutron added to that, and that allows that silicon to then be used in many of the equipment we use today, like mobile phones and so on. We also took a look at the building and the spaces that you aren't able to access as a public, and so we could just show some of the infrastructure there and the different buildings that they had as well. We brought this all together. There are a lot of different components, and there are a lot of imagery, a lot of animations, a lot of these 3D images, a lot of text. And what we wanted to do is then, as you always should do, think about your audience. What does your audience want to know? They want to know what radiation is. They want to know, you know, how different parts of that work, how nuclear medicine works. So we pulled it together in those different sections so they could then go off and explore different areas like that. We also pulled it together as a map view, so you can just pull out on different sections. Each of those koala, joey, kuari are actually neutron diffractometers, reflectometers, and you can then press on those and watch different animations of all of the different jobs that they do. For example, when you dive into the nuclear medicine area, you can see how nuclear medicine is used. You can see what happens in a medical scan, how the radioisotopes are then taken off and done that. There was a gallery and a whole lot of different elements pulled together there. Here's the research reactor from the flyover in its beautiful blue colours again. You can pop into the panorama area and more. So one of the things that we learnt from doing that is there's a couple of different experiences that you can offer. You can offer the completely immersive experience where people can choose to explore the area themselves, view nice pictures, pop into galleries. We also learnt that there's a great value in being able to pull all of that collateral apart. A lot of the materials that we produced are now used in the Discovery Centre, which is a physical space where tours can go and kids can go and do a lot of chemistry and things like that. So different elements were able to be pulled out and work in that space itself. We could develop sections for promoting the tour, so we could actually use that in marketing as well. A lot of the ways that it's used now is actually in Meet a Scientist video conferencing. So by introducing a scientist to talk about their particular research area, and this is another great thing that I thought Jackie B talked about, is in your video conferencing having those different roles. So the Meet a Scientist allows people to come in and find out what the job is like, and then the educator could then say, oh, look, okay, someone's just thrown in the word neutron diffractometry, so apologies, yes, I know it's a terrible term, but the educator could then say, it so happens that we have this animation here that explains that diffractometry. You can link that to your Year 12 physics and find ways to really connect with your audience there. Great to see Helen. Hi, Helen from. I hope I've done it justice. It's she's certainly working on one of those instruments there. So good to see Wombat. Absolutely some terrific research, and we learnt so much from putting that together. And it just has been very long-lived content, which is often quite hard to do. So to find ways to then utilise your content in different ways, as Jackie B said, you can do your own thing with your document camera. But you can also utilise what your organisation has and just think about how you can use those in different ways as well. I know that one of the ways they are using these today is developing worksheets which link to these resources so they can then share those with the students as well. So I'm going to just throw into questions, I think, Jackie.
Yep, we have a question from Jackie. Has this virtual tour had much engagement? Do you think elements of it would have worked as a live presentation somehow?
Yeah, so it is. It initially was a virtual tour where you could register in the same way that you registered for the physical tours. There was some concern then, as I think many people have a concern between going from physical to virtual. We've all been forced virtual now, but there's a sort of sense of like, oh, is this going to encroach on what I do in the kind of physical sense as well? They've actually found that the audience has just really grown with that. I know they're working with Asia Connections, which is works to live stream to schools all throughout the Asia region. So they've been able to take the reach from just the kind of southern Sydney area and schools that were coming up from Wollongong, and are now reaching schools all across Australia and into regional Asia Pacific as well. Any other questions, Jackie?
Paul asks, how are teachers using the resources? Are they using it in their own units of work, or are they using your full resource unit of work from start to finish?
Yeah, absolutely. So it maps, one of the things that was really important when we shifted from the original virtual tour concept and into developing an e-learning platform and e-learning resources out of that was if it's not mapped to the curriculum, it's not going to work for the schools. Fortunately, there's a lot of Year 11, Year 12 physics and chemistry, earth and environmental science to map to. So we took the approach then of like, what do the teachers and the students need most of all, and then taking segments of that. So we chopped up bits of the video, we took, sections of the tour and pulled those resources together and show the audience how that's going to map to the curriculum, and just make it really easy for them to then download that and use that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. I'm going to throw it back to Ben to introduce our next speaker.
Absolutely. And also, if you're sitting there thinking, going, I've developed this virtual resource that you've purposed for a particular group of people, have a think carefully about, can you use it for another audience, especially during this year? How can you create something around this that brings value not only to your organisation but to the general public, which is exactly what this is all about. Now, our next guest, Bonnie Tratt, is a very good friend of ours, and Karen's been heavily involved in distance learning for many years, and I'll let Bonnie introduce herself and what she gets up to.
Hi, thanks Ben, thanks Karen, thanks to the Jackies. I'll refer to them as the Jackies. They've pointed out some fantastic things. So those of you that have connected, who are looking at bringing your content online, the advice they had there's so many things I'd like to reiterate what they said, as well as letting you know that you're in very good hands with Karen and Ben for the years of experience that they have had. I've been working with Distance and Rural Technology, or DART as we refer to it, on a project called Connections, which is just about video conferencing. So COVID-19 has introduced this platform on such a bigger scale now, and we're very excited by what it actually has changed, because it is making all of the content that you have available to our distance and rural schools. And when I say that we are part of the Distance and Rural Technology Unit, what we have been involved in has been statewide for a very long time, and even beyond statewide. I think Jackie mentioned Asia Connection, which we've been working with for years as well, with Myung from there. So yes, for 15 years we've been at this gig, so welcome aboard everybody. It's great to have you all there. A couple of things I'd like to talk about that the Jackies touched on was things to remember, like the access to experts. That is your big selling point. You give access to students and the wider audiences, whether they're older audiences, whoever they happen to be, access to experts so that they can ask those questions. This platform that we're operating on at the moment does a great job of that as well, with the different educators in different areas, or the facilitators there to help with those questions. I think being able to ask questions is one of the biggest selling points of this whole Virtual Excursions platform. So that's a wonderful thing. The other thing was being larger than life. I think Jackie one spoke about, which is so true. If you have passion with what you are delivering, all the other things are just added bonuses, because your passion is what comes across when you are educating. Most of you who are involved in that field would know that anyway. If you feel strongly about what you have, or you've got passion for it, that is always displayed, and it's always important to keep that a little bit larger than life when you are presenting across video conferencing, especially. Your audience, what we had found, it's changed over the years, is the audience always felt they're a little bit second rate to the live audience that were there. Now that everybody's two-dimensional, it makes it easier for you to talk to the people, to the kids who are on camera. So that's all, or I should say audience, because that's not always kids. So yeah, being larger than life is very important. And the other thing that I'd like to point out or agree with the Jackies was bringing it back to curriculum. If you want to get what you're offering, your content into schools, then it has to be curriculum based. Most teachers are very pushed for time, and even more so now post-COVID, for what they need to deliver. They've got certain things they have, and if your content is curriculum based and it's got the added resources that you were talking about as well, then it allows them to tick more than one box. So anything you can provide for them that it just allows them to go, yep, there it all is in one big package, is going to be a huge selling point for you. There is so much competition out there now, and we've seen that just grow exponentially, especially since everyone has now gone virtual. Talking about the reach, when Jackie mentioned things like getting to Asia, we found we've always had a large reach, only limited usually by time constraints. This is for the live events that we've done. For those of you that don't know, I should not just expect that you all know what DART Connections is. So we have a website that we're now referring to, it's a bit like the yellow pages for content providers. You have your events listed, whether they are live, on demand. So your live events can be by request, or they can be scheduled for a time and a date, or by request means that the participants actually tell you which day and time they want it and you agree on a day and time. Or you have on demand, so it can point out to any content that you've got that is available anytime they like or for a limited period. And by that I mean the difference with the on-demand stuff is, for instance, Sydney Opera House may have a special guest speaker, say Tim Sharp for Autism Week. So they have Tim Sharp is an illustrator, for those of you that don't know Tim. And he has done work with Sydney Opera House before. So they may, for instance, make a pre-recording they've done of him available for a week. It's a YouTube link. They ask people to register. Once they register, they get sent this YouTube link and they can go and watch that particular event, but then it's only available for a week. Then they may have other content that's available all year round, so it's just a link straight into that on demand with backup resources, stuff that they have. So the Dart Connections website allows providers to have a profile, then they can list their events, as I said, whether they're live or they're on demand. And what our website does is that it's a service on behalf of New South Wales Department of Education that students, teachers, any kind of users, parents can come along and search, and they might go, okay, I'm looking for science for my Year 3 child, and it will return in that search live events available on certain dates. They may be one-on-one special events that have been done, whether it might be during a facility or a special author or a special scientist, whatever it happens to be, or it will also return any on-demand things that fit that criteria that search has been done on. So that means that your work is being returned in searches that teachers and students are going to have a look for. We recently had an event with Lisa Harvey-Smith. I think we've got another one coming up sometime soon, where we had over 400 registrations from places like Thailand, Japan, the UK, Ireland, Costa Rica, as well as every state in Australia. Some of them were teachers, some of them were homeschooled, some of them were just friends of teachers or people who had heard about this event happening, and they registered for the event and were sent a link to watch at a certain time or later on demand. So the reach can be very wide. As much as we started with the New South Wales Department of Education, and we are the New South Wales Department of Education, we make sure that we are available for a wider audience. And we do that so that the Department of Education, New South Wales Department of Education, students and teachers don't miss out on anything, so they're included in things. In talking about, Ben asked me to, and I'm going to dog you in here, Ben, but Ben did ask me to mention things that I think have rocked in the 15 years that we have been doing this. One of the things we started with was going and doing a live event from Siding Springs Observatory, where they do the re-illuminising of the mirror every year. And being live was over, we just shot it over a couple of days. People could ask questions. That was an amazing thing to be involved in, and we had a lot of positive feedback from that. If you could have seen the technology that we needed to haul around to film that and get it done, and that was done in 2007. So we had cameras this big, not iPhones, which you can do it all with now, or an iPad. So it was a lot harder to do then, but the content would be similar to what you can do now, obviously, with being able to tour a facility. One of my favourites was the dogless sledding from Alaska. We used to have a content provider. Unfortunately, they did get out of the business, but they had, it was called Kigluwait Adventures, and it was based in Alaska, and they used to be able to put a camera on the back of the dog sled. And you might have kids in a small school in Tamingley, Western New South Wales, sitting there watching from the camera on the back of the dog sled while and then they'd be instructed on what they could say. So they could tell the dogs to turn left, and the dogs would be running along and then they'd turn left. And it was just so interactive and so fantastic to be able to bring that to children who, were in such a different part of the world. The other one, of course, the Reef HQs, the Antarctica events. There's been so many, as well as those people who are passionate about things. They always tend to stick in my mind. And I think from what I've glanced here in the chat rooms to see the amount of people from different organisations and institutes, gee, I'm excited to see what else we can offer to people. And I think there's a lot of fantastic things out there. I'd like it to open up to questions and answers for people if they have anything they'd like to add.
Yep.
Jackie?
Nadia has a question. How best to link to curriculum? Who can do this for us?
Good question. I think we could probably point you to some links based, whether it's on the New South Wales Department of Education, I don't know which state she's in, or to go and look at the Australian-based curriculum. It depends greatly on the state, but usually stages have similar based curriculum they have, but there are parts of New South Wales Department of Education who can help with that, definitely.
Nadia just clarified for us that it's for WA.
Right, okay, so I would, if she's looking at going nationally, then possibly contacting the Australian Curriculum Board. I could find a link for her afterwards. I'm happy to do that. Or even speak to the Department of Western Australia. And Karen might be able to help with that as well because she's been in this field for a while. Karen?
Not specifically on curriculum, and it is good to think about that as well. But everything all of the people are talking about today in terms of engagement and some of the ideas work across the board. They work for children, schools, but also community engagement as well. So it's important to remember, even if we're talking about a school scenario, that they're still relevant for your adult audience groups as well, and your community engagements. And remembering that even if you are dealing with children, you're probably having a family audience, so that intergenerational engagement works really well. So all of these things, I just want to really just follow up with that passion that most of the presenters have spoken about is the key ways that you'll get engagement, no matter what the age of your audiences are. Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah, no, thank you. Jackie, how are we going? We done? We got any more?
Oh, let's have one more question from David. What are schools typically willing to pay for a live session? Would you charge lump sum per class or per individual child instead?
And hasn't this changed? I wish I could give you a definitive answer on that one. Past, before COVID-19, I would have said it was tricky to get any kind of costing from schools. Most of them being public schools, you know, education should be a free thing. It's so based on the individual experience. I'd probably like to open up to other providers for that question, Jackie, and see what success they've had with and how they've actually framed their payments.
That's probably a Ben and an I question as well. And I think, you know, I've worked at big cultural organisations before, and we were certainly in the, we were able to offer things for free. So we would often do a combination. If we had to get additional staff in, we would often charge if we were doing something a little bit different. Other times we would do things for free. Now, as a private education provider, I do need to look at charging. So I think you can do things as a set package price. You can do things individually for students. You just need to work out what your cost benefit is for you. And that goes the same with adult organisations as well. You've just got to balance that up. Sometimes you might want to do a free showcase and then have smaller, intimate, you know, real high level engagement that you charge for. So a balance can work there. Across to you, Ben. I know that we've had this conversation before.
Yeah, it's a conversation that won't go away, guys. Trust me. Here's the thing. Equity matters. So I know in the chat a couple of times people have mentioned equity. It's a thing. It sadly is around. So we do a suite of free, low cost and more bespoke programs for smaller events, and try and do it honestly at any time of the hour. Seriously, I got to do one at 4 a.m. this morning. Next morning. But the thing is that you all have your own needs. If you're clearly doing a funded event that is that does free, well, obviously you got to do that. If your organisation is by mandate has to do free, that's fine too. But also just be aware that everyone right now, especially this year, is hurting from a cash flow point of view, from not the business side, from the parents and the adults and they've got all these outgoings when they may not have a job. So being able to connect with your organisations is so powerful. So perhaps consider, maybe you don't have to do all the bells and whistles that you'd normally do. Perhaps maybe you could do a special program that's a special live stream or a special session for half an hour or whatever it is, and then do your other programs that might be paid. Maybe I don't want to splice up the content like a user pays things completely, but you've got to sort of make a decision about how that all works. I know plenty of sites actually do both, and there's special timings perhaps. And it's I don't think there's actually a real answer for this. I reckon if we actually had the ability to open everyone's microphone up right now, there'd be competing voices for sure. I guarantee it. Absolutely. Anything else there, Jackie, to ask that came through for Bonnie?
Yeah, we've got one more question for Bonnie. Kathy says that they're trying to get some curriculum materials developed and having trouble finding consultants. Can Bonnie suggest something?
It's happy. I probably have to send that to her outside of this. We really can't make referrals to people that aren't part of the department. I do work for the New South Wales Department of Education, so I might point back to the providers for that. One other thing I did want to say on the cost of things, so Jackie, can you just earmark Kathy's question, was when it comes to experiences, I like how Ben talked about giving them a little taste of things. Previously when we may have done an event like we did Dinosaur Day once, we did Things for Science Week, or there's been themes, and what we've done in those themed weeks is providers have given snippets, like a 5-minute or a 10-minute presentation as part of a half an hour event where they've been able to promote their organisation. And that's another way to get your name out there, and so that schools and teachers will look for more of your content. With places like, for instance, the Great Barrier Reef, they charge $300, but it's a one-on-one experience. So it's just one school and the provider, and it's very tailored, and you've got a diver in a tank with a camera asking and answering questions for kids in the classroom. So yet again, these really personal experiences are going to be the most that will obviously that students and schools will pay for.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. I'm going to go back to Ben, if that's all right.
No worries. I can always do an honest flick pass. And honestly, keep in mind that this is also training on how to handle a panel too. So often you will need a moderator to know what's coming up with timing, and someone who's sort of like the anchor person to go, right, I'm going to throw to the next person. And in this case, Sam Illingworth, who has been able to join us from a way away. And some people in this room do actually know Sam from WA. But he's come away from a bit further away than that this time, and he's got a lot of experience when it comes to science communication and might be able to share some light in this medium too. Sam, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Ben. So yeah, I'm a senior lecturer in science communication at the University of Western Australia, but given the current circumstances, I'm actually in the UK, so working remotely but secretly in Matilda Bay. And thank you very much for giving me this platform to talk a little bit about engaging audiences digitally. I've just got a few slides I'm going to talk through, and then I'm really welcome to take any questions. And thank you to my co-panelists for such great talks so far. My research and my work involves working and establishing dialogue between scientists and non-scientists, and in particular, giving voice to audiences that are traditionally underserved and underheard by science and science communication. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we can engage audiences digitally, how I've been doing that, how we can do it effectively, how we can do it innovatively, and how we can do it in a manner that hopefully ensures that all voices are heard. And if you want to connect with me at any point, here's my email address, my website, and I'm at Sam Illingworth on Twitter. I think the most important thing to remember when we're thinking about how to be engaging in a digital environment is to not forget any of the lessons that we've already learned in our many years of experience in producing and developing engaging content. And so that's why I've said, don't forget the analog. And there's just three things I want to concentrate on here. First of all, there are many publics. So we've heard before about how there's maybe a slightly different approach that we need to take for different audiences. And it's really important to remember that the experiences, needs, and technical capabilities of one audience is vastly different from another audience. So just as when we're developing any piece of engagement in the analog world, we wouldn't assume a one-size-all solution, because all we'd end up with then is something that wasn't really suitable for anybody. So when we're developing and delivering our online content, we need to remember that there are many different publics, be they Boy Scout networks, running groups, community groups, people working in and living in old people's homes. They have many different needs and experiences, so we need to account for those when we're developing and delivering our content. Secondly, all voices should be heard. And I'm going to touch on this again in a little bit, but I think it's really important to remember, especially in the current environment, that some people from different backgrounds will not have access to the different technology that's available to us. A quick example, Zoom. I mean, I love using Zoom. I think it's fantastic, but many different organizations, for example, some organizations that work with vulnerable children, aren't actually allowed to use Zoom because of dangers or perceived dangers in the security network there. So we need to really think about how we can utilize technology to ensure that all voices are heard. Because as we know, if we only have the same voices talking back to us, we create an echo chamber in which it's actually quite boring and quite dull for everybody. So when we're thinking about developing and delivering our digital content in an engaging manner, we need to make sure that we create a platform in which all voices can be heard. And then finally, attendance does not equal engagement. So again, something like Zoom is fantastic because you get the opportunity to ask questions and answers, to get involved with the chat. But just counting numbers doesn't necessarily mean that those people are engaged, just as we would do in a classroom setting as well. So we really need to remember all of these lessons when we're preparing our digital content. So yeah, we're living in unprecedented times to some extent, and lots of us are having to adapt and adopt to this new media. But it's vital that we don't forget all of the learning that we've already got when we're working with these audiences in this new digital arena. In terms of how we can develop innovative and engaging content, I think being interactive is absolutely key. And we've already heard about this from some of the panelists. So I've just put up here some ideas about how we can be interactive in these different platforms. And, you know, we are aware, I'm sure most people are aware that are in the attendees for this particular webinar, that we have a variety of different media, be that Google Hangouts, be that Zoom, be that MS Teams, be that Adobe Connect, be that GoToWebinar. So each of these has a different suite of tools that enable interactivity, but most of them have some format or some variety of those that I've listed on the screen, in addition to which we can always make a situation in which these can just be done anyway. So, you know, polls are a great way to test the water. I like to use polls when I'm doing a Zoom webinar, because they're a great way to see if the audience is engaged and listening to what's being done. Chat's a really useful way to ensure that, again, everybody can just feel engaged in the conversation, not just with the panelists, but with the attendees as well. So as Ben mentioned as well, when you're learning how to use and, you know, maintain a Zoom webinar or another webinar, it's important to have a protocol in place. Who deals with the chat? Who's in charge of responding to the chat? Are the panelists seeing the chat? Because if people aren't aware of that, there can be a lot of stuff going on, which can be quite distracting as well. Question and answers are a great way of, again, allowing people to feel as though their voices are being heard and that they're actually part of the conversation. And they can be picked up at the end of the session, or at the end of the panelists, or as we go through, depending on what the audience want and depending on what the speakers are engaged with as well. Activities, and we're going to do an example of an activity in a second. These aren't necessarily specific to the different platforms, but rather they're, again, thinking about ways in which we can utilize the platform to engage our audience, to work with that audience, and to allow for their needs and for their experiences as well. And I think that taps into creativity as well. All of us working in science communication, in science education, in public engagement, are creative people. And I think that what this digital arena presents is a great way for us to express that creativity. To give you an example of this, I was hosting a entirely text-based conference last week, which had about 180 participants, and it was really engaging, but at the same time, people couldn't hear each other's voices. So what we did was I made a Spotify playlist that was like themed around the science that was being discussed in that session, and shared it with everybody. And these were panelists and participants from across the world. And some of the feedback that we got was, this is great. Like, not only does Sam have an amazing music taste, but also it's an opportunity for all of us to feel as though we're connected because we're listening to the same songs at the same time. So, you know, there's ways for us to think about how we can utilize our creativity, again, from the analog in the digital arena. So with that in mind, I'd like us to actually do an interactive example. So a lot of my work is around using poetry and also games as a facilitatory tool to engender dialogue between disparate groups. And poetry is a really great way of letting all voices be heard, of breaking down barriers, and of creating a shared sense of vulnerability in which everybody kind of realizes that, you know, we're all maybe not that talented, but we all enjoy writing poetry. And one of the exercises I like to do is to get people to do a list poem. And I think that this works really well in a Zoom environment, because what it enables us to do is it enables us to provide all of our fellow attendees and panel members with a snapshot into the built environment and the lived environment that we currently are now. So what I'm going to invite all of you to do over the next minute, and don't worry, during this activity, I'm also going to be talking over the top of it, because there's nothing more awkward than silence in a Zoom chat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a minute and I'll time it. I'll just set my watch off going. And in that minute, what I would like you to do is I would like you to make a list. So a list poem is literally just you list everything you can see or everything you can hear or everything you can think about a particular topic. What I would like everybody to do to introduce some parameters for this structure in this creativity is for you to make a list of 5 things that are currently in the room where you are now sitting and or standing. And I'd like you to do it in a way that 4 of those things can be literal, but 1 of those has to be maybe slightly metaphorical or not literal at all. So for example, if I was looking around, I'd say, I'm in my in-laws' kitchen at the moment. So I would say, Arga, a teapot, chair, table, and awaiting the sense of a small child to come screaming in the room at any moment. So they are the things that would be in my room. So I'm just going to give you 60 seconds starting from now. I want you to write down those 5 things that are in your room. 4 of them, 1 of them, try to be a little playful with it. And then when you've done that, I would like you to put that in the chat section. Sorry, Ben and Jackie, if this like bombards the chat, but I'd like you to put it in the chat section, remembering to address it to participants and attendees rather than just, sorry, panelists and attendees rather than just the panelists. So do that now. You've got about another 30 seconds. And this is a really nice activity because what it does is it gives us the opportunity to, you know, feel connected and to be a little bit playful, to feel as though we are all part of the same conversation, which we are. We're all part of the same room, which we are, just in a virtual capacity instead. And it works really well because it enables people to feel as though they're actually in the room as well. And I'm getting there's some really nice ones here. Digital microscope, mug, table, monitor, artificial light, memories of family, past and present. Margaret, you are definitely a poet. That's absolutely beautiful. Bike, shoe, hand sanitizer, cockatoo, filing cabinet, and the silence that comes from kids not being here having fun. These are really, really wonderful. And what's great about this, or what I like about this exercise as well, and your minute is up so you can stop now, but please continue putting it in the chat. What I like about this exercise, and a great way to do this in Zoom, is also, especially if you're in a Zoom platform where you can see everybody's window, is to do a list poem of what you can see in other people's windows as well. And then that's a really nice way of, you can play a guessing game. Who am I describing? So we're in this environment and we're in a digital space, but it doesn't stop us from being playful. It doesn't stop us from being creative. And everybody could take part in that exercise. All we needed was a pen, a paper, or a keyboard as well. So I'd encourage all of you to, again, think about your creativity. There's some really wonderfully creative people on this panel and in the audience, I know as well. Think about that creativity and think about how you can use the platform to enable you to develop and deliver that as well. And then I just want to think about remembering all audiences. And this is one of my final slides. Not everybody has access to technology. Not everybody has access to Zoom. Not everybody has access to MS Teams. So what we need to really carefully think about is, how are we creating an environment that makes sure that all voices can be heard? And again, it's really important to not patronize people here. There's a great question in the chat about how do we engage with elderly people's homes that might not have a tech setup. And Ben gave a really nice answer where he said, look, yeah, we can work with the care workers to help with the tech, but it's important not to forget that there's a hell of a lot of experience and expertise with those senior citizens. And, I'll give you an example from my personal life. My grandma, who's 86, last year just taught herself how to use like Skype, how to use a laptop. And it was amazing. And she did that because she wanted to be more engaged and communicate more with her family around the world. So we need to remember all audiences. We need to create a platform for those audiences. We need to think about how we can involve all those audiences. To give you another example, in the higher educational sector, a lot of us are having to move on to Zoom and to MS Teams in order to engage with our students and run our webinars as seminars with them. However, not all students, especially those that are trapped in countries with poor internet connection, are able to do so. So what we've been doing there is we've been working with those students using WhatsApp instead, because that is a platform that requires a much lower bandwidth and which those students have much higher access to. So just think about all of those audiences and remember that not everybody has access to high-speed internet, a really fast laptop, and all of this digital tech. And not everybody has the skill set to do so either. So to finish then, my top 5 tips would be, don't forget all of your analog training. You've got years of experience. Don't just throw that in the water. This is just a new tool. That's all it is. You've got all of that skills, all of that skill set that you can put in there. Pick a platform that works for your audience. Just as when you're working out which social media platform to engage with, try out lots of different ones and then think about which one works best for you and which works best for your audience. Make the session interactive. I gave you an example of how you can do that, and then there's lots of creative people that can come up with similar ideas. Create an environment in which all voices can be heard. And I just cannot stress that enough. It's really, really important that we don't forget those voices that are traditionally underserved and underheard by science. And then finally, just be creative, have fun, listen to your audience members, be playful, be organic, and be flexible. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks very much for listening. Happy to take a few questions now, Jackie. And if people want to connect with me in the digital arena, this is how they can do so.
We've got 2 questions for you, Sam. The first one, Kathy would just like to know, what is your favorite platform or your favorite platforms?
Oh, cool. That's a really great question. So I love Zoom because it has a lot of really nice tech, a lot of really cool tools. As yourself and Ben will attest to, I'm sure it's great for doing panel discussions. It's really nice to be able to host and to be able to flick back and forth between different people. Also, big shout out to MS Teams. And I'll tell you why I like MS Teams, because if you're having a meeting in MS Teams, you can turn on an auto feature that auto creates subtitles. And, I've got a British accent, and it's not always the most easy to understand, apparently, especially when I'm working with students where English is not their first language. So getting the ability to be able to turn on instant subtitles that are like 98% accurate is a really cool thing to be able to do. I also like MS Teams because it automatically uploads that recording into their Microsoft Stream service, which you can then go in and edit the transcripts and do closed captions and stuff. So they're probably my 2 favorite tools that I'm using at the moment.
The next question comes from Jackie. Sam, how would you measure online engagement when communicating to general public rather than school audiences?
Oh, geez, it's like 5:30 in the morning here, Jackie. That's such a difficult question. Okay, so I think, as with anything, right, measuring engagement versus measuring attendance is really, really hard. one of the things that I like to do for measuring engagement is to do follow-up surveys. So I'm, for example, like with these 200 participants now, we do a survey at the end of this webinar to say, okay, great, how did people get on? But then it's also following up in 3 months' time, being like, did anybody actually remember anything from that webinar? Is anybody doing anything as a result of that webinar? Is anybody connected as a result of that webinar? So I think following up with participants and with people that you engage with would be absolutely fantastic. Ben, have you got a question as well?
I was just going to add to that. There are a lot of platforms these days. I mean, some people will find this strange, but actually track you. What that means is that you can actually tell if you start to play with your mouse and move off screen and start doing stuff, they actually can tell when you left the session and came back into the session. Now, you may not want to actually tell this to your people, but the reality is that if you're trying to work out, is your presentation engaging and people drifted off, you can totally tell with certain platforms about that. Just let you know too, we are technically over time, this is going into our Q&A session where it's going to involve all the panels, and definitely, hats off to Sam at 5:30 in the morning. Definitely want to keep those questions coming. But if you feel you need to run away, that is okay. This is definitely being recorded and we'll get this all up. I just thought I'd just put that out there in case people feel they need to run. But we're totally going to hang around like we do every time for 20 minutes or 30 minutes at least. So any more questions for Sam? I should have said Jackie.
Yes, there is. Michelle asks, is your course for non-science students, so for example, science engagement or communication students?
Okay, so at the University of Western Australia, we have a science communication major, which is for undergraduate students, and we also have a science communication master's, and I run both of those programs with my colleague, Dr. Heather Bray. Please fire me an email and I'll happily discuss and promote the University of Western Australia more in an email like that. But yeah, we absolutely have a platform for people who are involved who are wanting to do science communication, who are coming from a non-science background as well as coming from a science background as well. And for me, science communication is not just about learning how to explain my science to everybody in a way that is exciting. It's actually about working with audiences to give them the skill sets and the confidence to be able to interrogate and contribute towards scientific research and governance.
Thank you for that, Sam. We've got so many questions from throughout the session. I might open the floor up to the rest of the panelists for answering questions. I think there's one for Karen, if Karen is there.
Yeah.
There are two questions that are really similar, and they're both about the length of sessions. How long should they be? Would there be like a critical time limit for recorded video lessons as well for primary school kids?
I think when you're looking at the length of your sessions, it's important to again start with your audience. Jackie B was talking about a 3-minute attention span to make sure that you're moving amongst different components to make sure it doesn't get too monotonous. It's not too much of a talking head. This goes the same for adults audience as well. You probably can stretch it out. For today's session, we actually removed our break because we felt that the flow of it, and because we were having multiple speakers that were coming in plus broken with question time, we felt the dynamic was moving enough to remove that. If we felt that we had a block that we needed to break up, we'd put that break time back in again. So you can actually think about doing longer programs, 2 hours, including break times to help keep the flow and the engagement. For family audiences and kids, you want to keep that shorter again. Most of the programs I run are 45 minutes to an hour, but I do lots of engagements. I get the kids to move. I get the adults. Sometimes it's the adults asking questions. Sometimes it's the kids. Sometimes it's both. So I break it up from sharing slides to then back to me, breaking for questions, giving the participants time to sort of have that engagement. And those questions often direct me into different areas. So sometimes I'll be, I'm going to do this next. And then I get a great question. I'm like, well, you know what? everyone wants to now know about this, we'll maneuver off this way. So being able to be flexible and reactionary can be quite useful, but having those breaks as you go along. So really making sure that you make those changes to help it stay engagement. So you can absolutely do, 45-minute, 1-hour programs for families and kids. Completely do longer sessions as well if you've got an adult audience, but just set it up in advance. This is what the parameters are going to be. This is the structure. This is what we're going to be looking at. And then people know what they're signing in for, and giving people opportunities, just as Ben did then. Hi guys, we are a little bit over time. We had some great speakers. We know we've got more great questions. Stick around if you can, but if you can't, we're going to send you a recording later. And that gives people the option to stay if they really need to, but also to head off if they can't stay, time constraints for something else and that they need to go. So really it's starting off with your audience and then going from there. If you've got younger, like really sort of preschool family groups that you might be working with, you might only want to do a half-hour session or even 20 minutes with lots of getting up and lots of engaging with their adult on the other side of the camera. Again, I like getting people to call out at the screen to, give me answers. If it's a small group, I'll have my microphones on so I can hear them. Other times, I just trust that they're yelling at me from the other side, and knowing roughly what the answers will be, it means I can answer back to them as well. Ben, I think you've got something to add to that as well.
No, I was just smiling. You're just right. That's all I was doing there. All right, awesome. Any other questions, Jackie?
Yep, I have a question for Jackie B. Christina asks, any advice for creating a website where the public can access your content, Facebook or something else?
That's a great question. And our marketing team did a great job right as soon as the stay-at-home, and it looked like many places were going to be stay-in-place orders went down. We had a one-stop shop. This is one URL that all our education content was placed, and suggestions on what students did. And I'll actually share that with you right now. So this is our educator page. That normally is there, but we created a resource saying learning resources for students at home. And so this was geared for families mainly. And the way we curated it was for different audiences and their grade levels. So first grade would be year one for you all, just to let you know. But we had links for suggestions on what you could do, whether they're videos or actual lesson plans. And we made sure when we curated this, we were able to, that the resources that the families would need would be very simple, things that they could find at home, maybe a piece of paper or a pencil, or maybe it was they were actually going outside and exploring. And so we try to make sure and gear it towards different grade levels specifically, so it was really easy and searchable for our families. And so we used that one link for all of our resources, whether we were doing social media posts on Facebook, on Instagram. We had that one-stop shop, and that's what we're using over all our platforms.
Awesome. Thank you, Jackie. We have a question for Heather. That's all right. Heather, there's a question for you from David. Are there copyright issues if we were to use music or YouTube clips in a live stream?
Yeah, great question, David, and thanks for thinking of that. You're just like any other arena, you are publishing when you are getting your content out there to different audiences, and you need to acknowledge the source of that, but also you can't just take people's content and reuse it as your own. You can fair deal publishing, you can take a 10% section of that. So you're certainly welcome to use small clips and small sections to illustrate things, but unless you own the content, just be really wary of getting out there and just sharing things that aren't yours. This is different for education audiences. If you're teaching, you can use what you like, but if you are getting out to the community, do think about what you're getting. Most organisations will respond pretty quickly to a request for use, and that's certainly the best thing to do.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Heather. We have a question for Bonnie, if Bonnie is still there. It's all right. We might move to...
I am, sorry.
There we go.
Sorry.
That's all right. Nancy asks, can we access recordings of Dart content, and are they shareable?
You are. Usually what you have to do is you register for an event and then you get sent the link. Once again, it boils down to that being paid for, not being paid for, but I would happily put in our website address and you can have a look and filter and then go and look at that on-demand stuff. Definitely with the on-demand stuff, some of it is you have to register, others you don't. As it's more that yellow pages area for you to go and find things. So let me just go and find the link and I'll pop it in the chat area for you.
I might just jump in while that happens. One of the things that's been a discussion for, 10 years is pre-recorded better than live? I'm going to just put my hand down and say, look, eventually live wins because you answer question and answers back and forth. But of course, pre-recorded when you've got mass market helps. And then the other question that comes up, especially around museums, zoos, aquariums and everything else, is what is the value of pre-recorded content? What is the cost for that? So you might want to consider this. Once it's out there and being shared amongst 1,000 email addresses, the question always comes back is, will they engage with you again? Don't know. Don't actually know. And actually, I might even throw to Jackie here, if you're there. Jackie B, what are your thoughts on that? Because the pre-record things is something that comes up every year at ISTE.
It really does. This is a conversation that I think we've had over a couple of drinks at the bar as well. It's interesting, and it's something I actually struggle with as well. And it was something that I struggled with when we had our stay in place orders go down. We had all of these recordings of our previous programs, our broadcasts that we had done on Zoom webinar for students. Do I place it just out there for free? And I had to think about it for a second and then made the decision to do that. But normally under other circumstances, I wouldn't share that content unless a teacher specifically asked me because there was a fire drill at their school at that day. So there are some benefits of being able to have recordings. It may be that we have a special event and one group of students weren't able to join because their class period ends up not taking or being in the same time as your program. And this happens with time zones as well. Your audience, if you want a very large audience, some people might not be up or it might be too late for them and they still want to engage. So I kind of go back and forth and it like Ben said, it's definitely something that you kind of want to think about and what's the purpose of that video. Back to you, Ben.
No, I was just thinking about where a lot of the drama is the old school term of video conferencing. The word video gets in the way of the conferencing part. And I actually have, I'll flick a thing in the chat which actually talks, there's about 40 different versions that I've tracked of the name for what we're doing right now. In fact, the research got put out, and there's a genuine serious research got done for some colleagues of ours across the States, where it worked out that interactive virtual learning was the most all-encompassing tool, IVL. Problem is that the public doesn't care. The public uses whatever term they want, as do us as organizations. Now, I want to think about this. Currently, we have 143 people on this conference, all of which are going to have different names. Now, I want you to imagine that you're the consumer and you're trying to work out what is this type of virtual learning. Imagine they're completely confused. So if I could put something out there that's been an ongoing thing in amongst the distance learning community for many years, is trying to unify a name makes a huge difference because the audience themselves is confused like you wouldn't believe. And I'll put a link into that because it's a real thing. Jackie, any other questions?
Yes. This one is for Karen. Karen, Lara asked, have you presented to classes where kids don't each have their own devices? So, for example, all the kids are watching the presentation in the classroom smartboard or are in the library.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ben and I have been doing this a lot, and certainly it's very much that school model that when back in the day, last term when kids were actually able to be in class, we could have up to, I'd often do sort of 6 or 7 classes all at once, and then the teacher sort of is in control of the microphone and engaging that way, and it works really well. You can also do sessions when there's small group working on iPad. You might have 2 or 3 participants on an iPad, and you're connecting that way. And again, this is when you're thinking about sort of the nursing home or aged care facility connections, juvenile justice centres, the hospital schools as well. They will do the same thing. They'll have sort of one screen that you'll often get the participants around, and you're engaging through that single medium. So you've got, thinking of a cinema, you've got one screen and you've got an audience there. So you do need to change the way that you interact a little bit, but again, it can come across quite the same way. So thinking about that as we move forward from COVID and in 6 months' time or a year's time, are you going to be doing things to a community hub? So you're at your regional library and you do have participants in the one location, but you're still connecting remotely, socially distanced, of course. So you do need to think about the opportunity to have a single screen with multiple people at the other side, or even family groups on one device if you're going to be running family programs. So it is something to certainly be aware of, but a lot of the engagement techniques are the same as you would use if you're doing a one-to-one or a live stream. So you still need to think about that engagement and that passion. Some of the great things Sam and Jackie B have mentioned as well about those little programs and activities still work just as well when you've got a whole class or a whole group in the one location as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. We've got a couple of questions that I think Ben would like to answer, so I might let him do that.
I cannot remember what they are, but
Caitlin asked a question about green screens. Would it be better to use one, if you have one, instead of screen sharing so that you're still in the frame? Or can you have a little window in the bottom with a picture?
Very cool. And I hope, Caitlin, you're still in this conference. If not, you're listening to this in the recording. Yes, you can do this. The only issue that you need to do is you need to have some form of way of bringing that feed onto your green screen. In the previous chats, we mentioned there's software called Open Broadcasting Software, OBS, that does it. But there are other platforms that do this too. Wirecast is one. It's quite popular around the place. There are boxes that will do this for you. One's called Black Magic Design, I think, or something like that. Some of you who are in formal organization spaces with really fancy TriCaster systems, you can do that too. But you need a way of doing that. You need to get it up there. So it can work. It's just a bit of playing around.
There's another question from Wayne asking if a session is being remotely delivered to a youth group that are all around a single screen, how can I capture the votes of the whole group as the poll only allows a single person's vote?
I remember that. This is a little bit controversial. Some sites don't like BYOD, bring your own device. Others love it. So if you've got everyone hanging out on their phone, assuming they've got the ability to do that and are allowed to have it in the space, there is no reason why they can't be using a polling third-party software. I mean, it got mentioned way earlier ago by, I think, Jackie Randalls with Poll Everywhere. That's definitely one I've used before. And you can then feed that through. Others, eventually it's that, you can do the analog version, as Sam mentioned. Analog is still useful. You can still have the person take the hand count and then go 15 votes yes, 40 votes no, or whatever. Just wondering, I might throw to Sam. Any other ideas you'd like to do with that?
Just in terms of, exactly like you said, Ben, I think just remembering that people are still in the room, people are still there. So I like to get people to do a virtual handshake. So I know that, like a virtual hands clap. So this is my virtual hands clap, right? Like jazz hands. And that's like a really nice way of being like, we're in a new platform, but we're all connected. And that's a nice way to keep everyone engaging. As I'm sure all the panelists will appreciate, when you have like 40 in a screen faces looking back at you going like this, it feels really nice, and it also feels like you're on some kind of West End show, which is great.
I'm going to challenge the group here because I haven't tried this. I want to play with a thing called Merge Cube, which is basically like a cube, but it's got QR codes all over it. And I kind of wonder what would happen, because that's traditionally done in a hall where you could watch people. I'm going to throw out there, I want to see if someone can try it in a virtual environment. I 100% haven't tried it before. But the idea is that you kind of got to be no fear of failure sometimes when you try something out. Cool. Any other questions, Jackie?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Jackie B, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, there's just one other technique that I've used when polling with a large group that happens to be in front of us. Because again, this is what what was the normal for me beforehand, is actually if you have multiple choices, I actually have them be able to use their different body parts or give me different signals to share out. So for example, one of our programs, we look and figure out if an animal is a carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore. So to see students do 1, 2, or 3 from very far away, it's really hard to see. So instead I say, okay, if you think it's a carnivore, put your hand on your head. If you think it's a omnivore, put your hand on your shoulders. If you think it's a herbivore, put your hand on your nose. And I can actually see, because usually students or your group is pretty far away from the camera that is actually broadcasting, I can see those big actions. So it might be that I have somebody put hands up or hands down. Creating those big gestures is also a way that you can poll as an analog way.
I'd love to add to that too, Jackie B. And I've used it really well with true and false. Hands on your head if you think it's true, hands on your lap if you think that it's false. And what it also gives you, especially when you're working with family audiences and even adults as well, it gives a sense of movement as well. So not only are you getting that sort of polling aspect of getting your participants to answer a question, you're actually giving them some action and some movement. And that can really help, especially if you're doing a slightly longer session, to just create, help everyone keep in the moment. So I think it works on 2 ways. So yeah, it's a really, really good one. Simple, really visual. You can do it with, single 1-to-1 screens, but you can also do it with that large group as well. And I do it in person as well when I'm actually in a real room face to face with people.
Thanks to all our panelists for such a comprehensive answer. We have a question from Vanessa about insurance. How would you cover participants who you're engaging with if you're wanting them to do an experiment at home or go outside and collect samples in their garden, etc.? Would anybody like to answer that question?
In a very short version, I do actually get my participants after the session, so I don't do it at the same time, but a lot of mine involves going out and looking for spiders, going out and looking for mini beasts in your backyard, doing lots of outdoor observations. So I do put some safety tips in my programs to, certainly if I'm working with families, always making sure the children let their adult know that they're actually going out and doing this. Don't touch anything that they don't recognise, wear gloves, those kinds of things. So it can be really, really tricky. Because I'm getting mine after the session, it's an optional addition. So that's, I'll throw to someone who does experiments within programs and see whether they've had other experiences in terms of insurance for that.
Yeah, well, by the way, we talked about this in the previous session, and you don't want to have too much silence for a while. People go, is something wrong with my audio? No, okay, so insurance is always going to be very much one for your legal team, and if you don't have a legal team, we have this Google thing. But the thing about it is the insurance, there are actually genuinely, for cyber insurance, we actually have cyber insurance as part of what Fizzics does, because it is actually a real thing. But no amount of insurance stops a problem, which means no amount of risk assessing stops eventually a problem. That's why we call it a risk assessment. You work out what's going to be appropriate and what's not appropriate. One thing I'd like to throw out there is think very carefully about kids, especially in a public environment, if they're in a library or whatever. How might they repeat the thing you're doing and hurt themselves? How might they do a particular experiment and get water over the electronic thing? And so put it to a separate side. It's all those simple things and taking the time to think, what is the impact of the thing I'm doing now? Makes all the difference. I mean, obviously insurance is a serious, you've got public liability, professional indemnity, those are real things, and you should consider having them. This is not legal advice, we're framing it there, but the reality is though, is that you should have it, but no amount of insurance stops a silly thing happening. So you just got to, think about stopping the silly thing happening in the first place. Cool. Any other questions, Jackie?
I think Stephanie's just typing up the final responses, but I think that's everything. I think we managed to answer pretty much all the questions.
Fantastic. And thanks for those people just, the hardcore hanging around for 20, 30 minutes later. That's awesome. Speaking of hardcore, Jackie, it's not exactly an easy time frame for you right now. And Sam is getting easier, though you probably need a morning something to wake up. So I might even just throw this. Jackie, thank you very much. And Sam, thank you very much for joining in with this. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're doing those. Thank you, Bonnie, for joining in with this. Thank you for all the moderation team. Karen Player from Sydney Science Education, Heather Catchpole from Refraction Media, and all the physics team doing their thing as well. Look, much appreciated. And look, to answer the question, yes, this 100% is recorded. You will get that very, very soon. They'll be emailed out. And of course, the survey. The survey helps very much help us frame what we're doing. We are doing this next week on Tuesday at 1 o'clock Australian Eastern Standard Time. Just because the content sounds the same, it will not be. There are different panelists involved. And we really do bounce off questions very well, which means, or maybe you may say maybe we don't, but that means that the questions themselves are always different, which means the content will be different. So if you want to tune in for that, I suppose tune in next week on Tuesday. Look, much appreciated, guys. The register link is in the chat right now, and we'll get that email out to you very soon. Have a fantastic afternoon, morning, almost midnight, whatever it is that you're doing, and we'll catch you another time. All the best, guys.
See you later, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for the Virtual Excursions training, supported by Inspiring Australia. You can find more information and top tips on the Virtual Excursions Australia website.